Welcome back to another evening of myths and legends. Tonight, we travel to ancient Greece, to the marble halls of Mount Olympus itself. There, among the immortal gods, sits a queen whose story is far more complex than you might expect. She is powerful, she is beautiful, and she carries a wound that never heals. Her name is Hera, queen of the gods, goddess of marriage, and perhaps the most misunderstood figure in all of Greek mythology. Every queen has a crown, but every crown has a weight, and Hera's crown was heavier than most, forged not just from gold, but from love, betrayal, and an anger that would shake the heavens. She was called the jealous goddess, the vengeful queen. Stories painted her as cruel, petty, relentless in her punishments. But those stories rarely asked why. Tonight, we ask why. Tonight, we look beneath the crown to find the heart that still beat underneath. And perhaps, by the end, you will see Hera in a different light. Our story begins long before Olympus existed. In a time when the world was ruled by the Titans, ancient beings of immense power, and the cruelest of them all was Cronus. Cronus feared a prophecy. One of his children would overthrow him, just as he had overthrown his own father. So he made a terrible choice. Each time his wife Rhea bore a child, Cronus swallowed them whole. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Poseidon, Hades, one by one, consumed by their own father. Young Hera knew only darkness. Trapped within her father's immortal belly, she waited in that strange prison with her siblings. But the gods cannot truly die, and so they endured. Then came Zeus, the youngest child hidden away by Rhea, raised in secret. He returned as a young god, fierce and determined, to free his siblings and challenge his father. With cunning and courage, Zeus forced Cronus to release the swallowed gods. And Hera emerged into the light for the first time, gasping alive and gazing upon her rescuer. She saw a god who had risked everything for his family, a warrior who stood against tyranny. And in that moment, something kindled in Hera's heart that would never quite fade. But Zeus was not the only one transformed by their meeting. He too looked upon Hera and saw something extraordinary. A goddess of unmatched dignity, strength, and beauty. Zeus pursued her for 300 years, but Hera was no easy conquest. She demanded respect, commitment, devotion. She would be no passing fancy. Finally, Zeus transformed himself into a wounded cuckoo bird, shivering in a storm. When kind-hearted Hera took the poor creature to her breast to warm it, Zeus revealed himself and stole a kiss. Tricked but charmed, Hera agreed to become his queen. And their wedding was the greatest celebration the cosmos had ever witnessed. The earth bloomed with new flowers, the heavens sang. For one perfect moment, love had conquered all. But perfection, as every myth teaches us, never lasts. To understand Hera, we must first understand what she ruled. She was not merely Zeus's wife. She was a goddess in her own right, with powers and domains that touched every mortal life. Hera was the goddess of marriage. Every wedding vow spoken anywhere in the Greek world was made under her watchful gaze. She blessed the unions she approved and cursed those she did not. She was the protector of married women. When a wife suffered, when a husband strayed, when families broke apart, it was Hera to whom women prayed for justice and strength. Childbirth also fell under her domain, shared with her daughter Eileithyia. The pain and danger of bringing new life into the world was eased by Hera's blessing, or worsened by her curse. And she was the guardian of family itself. The sacred bonds between parent and child, the loyalty of the household, the continuity of generations, all these were Hera's sacred charge. Her symbols told her story. The peacock with its 100 watching eyes spoke of her vigilance. Nothing escaped Hera's notice, especially not betrayal. The cow represented her nurturing side, her role as mother and provider. It was a sacred animal in her temples, honored and protected. The pomegranate, split open to reveal its ruby seeds, symbolized marriage and fertility. Brides carried them. Temples displayed them. They were Hera's fruit, and the lotus flower crowned her scepter, representing purity and divine authority. When Hera raised that scepter, even gods took notice. Her temples were among the grandest in Greece. The Heraion of Samos, built on the island where legend said she was born, was one of the largest temples ever constructed. Argos claimed her as their special patron. The city loved Hera above all other gods, and she returned that devotion with fierce protectiveness. Women across Greece celebrated the Heraia festivals in her honor. They ran races, made offerings, and prayed for her blessings on their marriages and children. Now let us return to Olympus, to those early days after the divine wedding. For a time, Hera knew happiness, such as she had never imagined. Zeus doted upon his queen. He built her a throne of gold beside his own. He showered her with gifts. He proclaimed her the most beautiful goddess in all creation. They walked together through the clouds at sunset. They whispered secrets only immortals could share. For a brief, shining moment, they were truly in love. And children came. Their firstborn was Ares, god of war. He inherited his father's strength and his mother's fierce temper, becoming the most feared warrior among the gods. Ares grew into a god of terrible beauty and endless appetite for battle. He was not wise like Athena or strategic like his father. He was war itself, pure and brutal. Hera loved him fiercely, even when others scorned him. Even Zeus looked upon Ares with disappointment. But a mother's love does not depend on approval. Then came Hebe, goddess of youth. She was everything lovely and innocent, eternally young, serving as cupbearer to the gods. Hebe had her mother's beauty and a gentleness that softened every room she entered. She brought joy wherever she went, a living reminder of better days. Eileithyia came next, goddess of childbirth. She inherited her mother's domain over the sacred moment when new life enters the world. Whenever a woman cried out in labor, Eileithyia heard. She could ease the pain or prolong it. This power would later become a weapon in Hera's arsenal. And then there was Hephaestus, the god of the forge. His story is perhaps the saddest of all Hera's children, for it reveals wounds within the divine family itself. Hephaestus was born lame, his leg twisted. In some tales, Hera herself cast him from Olympus in shame. In others, Zeus threw him down during a quarrel. The truth matters less than the wound. Hephaestus grew up far from Olympus, raised by sea nymphs, learning the secrets of fire and metal in his lonely forge. He became the greatest craftsman the universe had ever known. His hands shaped wonders. But his heart carried a wound that no forge fire could burn away. In time, Hephaestus returned to Olympus. He and Hera reconciled, though the damage could never fully heal. She learned that some mistakes cannot be unmade. These were Hera's legitimate children, the ones born of her union with Zeus, the ones she loved openly and completely. But they were not Zeus's only children. For Zeus, king of the gods, was also king of wandering eyes. His appetite for love affairs was legendary, and his faithfulness to Hera lasted about as long as morning dew. The first time Hera discovered his infidelity, her world cracked like ice in spring. She had given him everything, her trust, her devotion, her very identity as his queen. She confronted him in their chambers, voice trembling with rage and heartbreak. How could he? After everything. After 300 years of courtship, of promises. Zeus made excuses. It meant nothing, he said. She was still his queen, still the only one who mattered. But words are cheap, even from the king of gods. And then he did it again. And again. Mortal women nymphs. Tightnesses. It seemed no female creature was safe from the attentions of Almighty Zeus. Each affair twisted the knife deeper. Each child born outside their marriage was a fresh wound. Hera's love curdled slowly into something else, something darker. She could not punish Zeus directly. He was king of the gods, mightier than any other being. When she tried, he overpowered her, humiliated her, reminded her of her place. Once, she led a rebellion against him with other gods. They bound him while he slept. But he was freed, and his vengeance was terrible. He hung Hera from the sky with golden chains. So she could not strike at the king. But the women he loved, the children they bore, they were not so protected, and Hera's rage needed somewhere to go. This is the tragedy at the heart of Hera's story. She was wronged again and again. But in her pain she became what she most hated: a tormentor, a destroyer of innocence. The women Zeus seduced rarely had a choice. Gods do not ask permission. They simply take. Yet it was these victims who bore the brunt of Hera's jealousy. We might call this unjust. We might call it cruel. And it was both. But we might also call it the desperate rage of someone who had no other outlet for her pain. Now let us meet some of the other gods who shared Olympus with Hera. For she did not exist in isolation, but as part of a divine family with all its rivalries and alliances. Athena, goddess of wisdom, had sprung fully formed from Zeus's head. She was everything Hera was not. Born without a mother. Favored completely by their shared father. Hera and Athena maintained a cold civility. They were too different for friendship, too similar in their pride for open conflict. An uneasy distance served them best. Apollo and Artemis, the divine twins, were children of Zeus and the Titaness Leto. Their very existence was a reminder of Zeus's betrayal, their birth a story of Hera's cruelty. Hera had persecuted their mother Leto throughout her pregnancy. She forbade any land from giving Leto shelter. She sent monsters to hunt her. We will tell that tale another night. Aphrodite, goddess of love, was perhaps the only Olympian Hera genuinely despised. For Aphrodite represented everything Hera blamed for her husband's wandering. Where Hera stood for faithful marriage, Aphrodite celebrated passion wherever it bloomed, regardless of vows or consequences. They were natural enemies. Poseidon, god of the seas, was Zeus's brother and Hera's brother-in-law. Their relationship was complicated, as all things were in that family. Poseidon sometimes joined Hera's schemes against Zeus. He understood being overshadowed by a brother. But he was unreliable, following his own tides. Hades ruled the underworld and rarely came to Olympus. When he did, he and Hera treated each other with respectful distance. He had his realm. She had hers. Demeter, goddess of harvest, was Hera's sister. They shared an understanding that the male gods rarely grasped. Both knew the pain of mothers, the bonds of family. Hestia, eldest of the siblings, kept the sacred hearth of Olympus burning. She had chosen eternal virginity and asked for no throne, seeking only peace. Hera respected Hestia's choice, even if she could not understand it. To have no consort meant no betrayal. Perhaps there was wisdom in that flame, tending solitude. Hermes, the messenger god, was another of Zeus's illegitimate children. Quick, witted and charming, he could talk his way out of any situation. Hera tolerated Hermes better than most of Zeus's bastards. He served useful purposes, and his charm was difficult to resist even for the jealous queen. Dionysus would come later, born of the mortal Semele in fire and tragedy. His story intertwines with Hera's in ways we shall soon explore. This was the world Hera inhabited, a family of immortals with endless time for grudges and schemes, loves and hatreds, played out across eternity. And through it all, Hera sat on her golden throne, watching, waiting, planning. She had learned that patience was the only weapon she could wield freely. The mortal world below offered some relief from Olympus politics. Her worshippers loved her genuinely, needing nothing from her but blessing and protection. Women especially prayed to Hera, brides on their wedding days, wives struggling with unfaithful husbands, mothers in childbirth. They understood her in ways the gods never could. In return, Hera listened. Not always kindly, but always attentively. She heard their prayers and felt their pain echoing her own across the divine divide. Her temples were staffed by priestesses who devoted their lives to her service. They kept the sacred fires burning and the rituals properly observed. The greatest of these temples, the Heraion of Samos, held wonders from across the known world. Pilgrims traveled vast distances to seek the goddess's favor. At Argos, the annual Heraia festival drew women from every corner of Greece. They competed in foot races, the winners earning olive wreaths and eternal honor. For a few days each year, the usual restrictions on women lifted. They gathered, competed, celebrated, all under Hera's approving gaze. Marriages were often timed to coincide with Hera's festivals. Couples believed her blessing would ensure faithful unions and healthy children. Brides offered locks of their hair to Hera before their weddings, a piece of themselves given to the goddess who would watch over their marriage. In some regions, brides bathed in sacred springs believed to restore virginity. They emerged renewed, ready to begin their new lives as wives. These rituals connected mortal women to their goddess. In honoring Hera, they honored the institution of marriage itself, with all its hopes and struggles. And Hera, for all her flaws, took these duties seriously. She was not merely a jealous wife. She was the guardian of something sacred. Now that we understand who Hera was, her domains and her relationships, her power and her pain, we can follow her through the myths that made her infamous. The first of these takes us to a priestess named Du, a beautiful mortal girl who caught the wandering eye of Zeus, and became the first great target of Hera's wrath. Io was a priestess of Hera herself. She served in the goddess's temple at Argos, tending the sacred fires and leading the rituals with perfect devotion. She was young and beautiful, with eyes like a gentle doe and hair that fell in dark waves around her shoulders. Princes had sought her hand, but she belonged to the goddess. Zeus saw her one day as he gazed down from Olympus. Perhaps he was bored. Perhaps he was testing fate. But when he saw Io, he decided he must have her. He came to her in dreams first. Whispers in the night, telling her to go to a certain meadow by the river Lerna. There, he promised, her destiny awaited. I woke trembling. She told her father Inachus, the river god, of these strange dreams. He consulted the oracles, and their answer terrified him. The oracles said Io must leave home or bring destruction upon all of Argos. With breaking hearts, her father sent her away. She went to the meadow, as the dreams commanded. There in that meadow Zeus came to her, not as a god in his glory, but disguised, charming, irresistible. What choice did a mortal girl have against the king of gods? But Hera was watching. She always watched. From her throne on Olympus, she had seen Zeus leave, noted his direction, recognized the signs of another betrayal. She rose from her throne and descended through the clouds, following her husband's trail. The other gods pretended not to notice. They had learned not to get involved. Zeus sensed her coming. His divine senses prickled with the approach of his queen. He had only moments to act, to hide his crime somehow. In desperation, he transformed Io into a white heifer. A beautiful cow with soft eyes and gleaming coat, but a cow nonetheless. He thought this would disguise his affair. When Hera arrived, she found her husband standing in a meadow, beside a remarkably beautiful white cow. Her eyes missed nothing. Her instincts screamed the truth. She smiled sweetly, which Zeus knew meant danger. "What a lovely cow," she said. "Wherever did you find such a creature? Surely you would give it to me as a gift?" Zeus was trapped. To refuse would confirm his guilt. To accept would condemn the girl he had just pursued. He handed the heifer to his wife. Hera took her prize with satisfaction. She knew exactly what this cow truly was, and she had plans for the unfortunate creature. She called upon her most trusted servant, a giant named Argus Panops, which means the all-seeing. He was perfectly suited for the task she had in mind. Argus had 100 eyes covering his entire body. Even when he slept, only some eyes closed while others kept watch. Nothing could escape his vigilance. "Guard this heifer," Hera commanded. "Do not let her escape. Do not let anyone approach her. Watch her every moment, day and night." And so Io's prison began. She was staked in a field, watched by the 100-eyed giant. She could not speak, could not explain, could not plead for mercy. She tried to call out to her father, but only moose escaped her throat. She tried to write her name in the dirt with her hoof, but Argus swept the marks away. Days became weeks. Io ate grass and drank from streams, her human mind trapped in an animal body. Every night she wept, though even her tears were a cow's tears. Her father Inachus searched for his daughter everywhere. One day he came to the field where the white heifer was kept, not knowing who she was. Io ran to him as far as her chain allowed. She nuzzled against him, lowed plaintively, tried desperately to make him understand. And somehow, father knew daughter. He wept against her white neck. "What has happened to you, my child? What god has done this terrible thing?" But she could not answer except with mournful cries. Thennow managed to scratch letters in the dirt before Argus could stop her. Just 2 letters. I.O. her own name. Proof of who she was. Inochus cried out in anguish. He raged against the heavens, cursed the gods who had stolen his daughter. But what could a river god do against Olympus? Argus drove him away eventually as Hera had commanded. No visitors, no comfort, no hope, just endless watching and endless captivity. High on Olympus, Zeus watched his former lover suffering with something like guilt. He had caused this. His lust, his cowardice, had condemned an innocent girl. He could not undo what Hera had done directly. That would mean open war between king and queen. But perhaps there was another way. He summoned Hermes, his son, the cleverest of all the gods. The messenger who could talk his way past any obstacle, charm any guardian, solve any problem. "Free the white heifer," Zeus commanded. "Do whatever you must. Kill the guardian if necessary. But bring no harm to the girl herself." Hermes flew down from Olympus, his mind already working on the problem. Argus could not be defeated by force alone. Those 100 eyes saw every attack coming. So Hermes came not as a god, but as a shepherd. He wandered near Argus's field, playing a simple reed pipe, seeming completely harmless. Argus watched him with a dozen eyes while the rest remained fixed on Io. A shepherd was no threat. But the music was pleasant, and the giant was bored. "Come closer," Argus called. "Play for me. This duty is tedious, and your music helps pass the time." He did not suspect the shepherd's true nature. Hermes sat beside the giant and played his pipes. Sweet, drowsy melodies that seemed to hang in the air like honey. Music designed to lull. As he played, Hermes began to tell stories. Long, wandering tales with no particular point, the kind that make eyelids heavy and thoughts drift. He told the story of Pan and Syrinx, how the god of the wild pursued a nymph until she transformed into river reeds. How Pan made those reeds into pipes. The music wove between the words. One by one, Argus's eyes began to close. 10 eyes shut, 20, 50. Still Hermes played and talked. Still the eyes kept closing. 60, 70, 80. The giant's massive head began to nod. 90 eyes closed. 90, 9. And finally, impossibly, the last eye fluttered shut. Argus Panops, who had never fully slept, was unconscious. Hermes stood slowly. He drew a curved sword from beneath his shepherd's cloak. The disguise fell away, revealing the god in his true form. He looked at Io, who watched with hope blazing in her bovine eyes. Soon, he promised silently. But first, this grim task must be completed. With one swift strike, Hermes severed Argus's head from his shoulders. The 100-eyed giant died without ever waking, still deep in enchanted sleep. Io was free. Hermes cut her silver chain and stepped back, expecting Zeus to undo the transformation. But nothing happened. She remained a cow. Perhaps Zeus could not reverse Hera's curse. Perhaps he chose not to, fearing his wife's reaction. Either way, Io remained trapped in animal form. Hermes departed with apologies and well wishes, returning to Olympus. He had done what he could. The rest was beyond even divine intervention. When Hera discovered what had happened, her scream shook Olympus. Argus, her faithful servant, was dead. Her prisoner had escaped. She found Argus's body in the meadow. For a moment, her rage gave way to genuine grief. He had served her loyally, and this was his reward. She gathered up his 100 eyes, cradling them like precious jewels. These would not be forgotten. These would be honored forever. She called her sacred peacock and, with divine power, placed Argus's eyes into its tail feathers. Now those 100 eyes would display their beauty for all eternity. And so the peacock gained its magnificent tail, covered in watching eyes. Every peacock from that day forward would carry Argus's memory in its feathers. This, the Greeks said, is why the peacock is sacred to Hera. This is why its feathers bear those strange eye markings. A servant's sacrifice, remembered forever. But Hera's grief quickly turned back to rage. O had escaped, and Hera's vengeance was not satisfied. The girl would suffer, even if she could not be recaptured. She created a gadfly, a stinging insect with a particularly cruel bite. She enchanted it with divine purpose and set it upon Io's trail. The gadfly found Io within hours. It landed on her back and bit deep, injecting a maddening venom that would give her no peace, no rest, no moment of comfort. She ran from the meadow, from Argos, from Greece itself. The gadfly pursued, never tiring, never stopping, driving her mad with pain. Across the sea she swam, the water giving momentary relief before the gadfly found her again on the far shore. Through Asia she wandered, maddened and tormented. The Greeks named the sea she crossed the Bosphorus, the Ox Ford, in memory of her passage. Geography itself remembered Io's suffering. Years passed. Io wandered through countless lands, never finding peace. She met other victims of divine cruelty along the way, fellow sufferers who understood her pain. In the Caucasus Mountains, she encountered Prometheus, the titan who had stolen fire for humanity. He was chained to a rock, eagle tearing at his liver. Even in his agony, Prometheus spoke to her with kindness. He could see the future, and he offered her a prophecy. Her suffering would end, he promised. In Egypt. Go to the Nile, he said. There Zeus will touch you gently, and you will be restored. There you will bear a son who will found a great lineage. Io took heart from his words. She had a destination now, a purpose to her wandering. She turned south, toward Egypt, the gadfly still at her heels. More years passed. More lands crossed. More suffering endured. But Io kept moving, kept hoping, kept remembering Prometheus's promise. At last, she reached Egypt. The great Nile spread before her, its waters promising the peace she had sought for so long. She stepped into the sacred waters, and there Zeus's touch finally reached her. Not with lust this time, but with healing. A gentle brush of divine power. Her body began to change. Hooves became feet. Hide became skin. The cow's form fell away like a shed garment, and Io stood again as a woman. She wept with relief. Years of torment ended in this single moment of grace. She was herself again, though the scars on her soul would never fully heal. The gadfly circled once, then flew away. Without Hera's curse to sustain it, the creature had no more purpose. Io's torment was truly over. She bore a son there in Egypt, just as Prometheus had foretold. She named him Epaphus, meaning touch, for the gentle touch that had restored her. Epaphus would become a king of Egypt. His descendants would include heroes and rulers, their bloodlines stretching across generations. Among those descendants, many generations later, would be Perseus and Heracles themselves. Io's suffering had planted seeds that would grow into legends. The Egyptians honored Io as Isis, the great goddess of magic and motherhood. Her journey from victim to deity was complete. And what of Hera? She had won in a sense. She had tormented her rival for years, driven her mad with suffering. But Io had survived, Io had triumphed. Hera's vengeance had backfired. Instead of destroying Io, she had transformed her into something greater. The priestess had become a goddess in her own right. Perhaps that is the lesson of Io's tale. That suffering endured can become strength. That even the cruelest persecution can be survived and transformed. Or perhaps the lesson is darker. That the powerful will always find victims. That innocence is no protection against divine whim. Both truths exist in this myth. Both meanings echo down through the ages. The Greeks did not tell simple stories with simple morals. But for now, let us return to Olympus. To Hera on her throne, nursing her wounded pride. To the peacock spreading its feathers, eyes watching eternally. The tale of Io was finished. But Hera's anger was not. Zeus would betray her again and again, and each time, someone would suffer for his sins. She had made her point with Io. She had shown what happened to those who dallied with her husband. But the lesson never seemed to stick. And Hera was left to guard a marriage that her husband seemed determined to mock. Queen of heaven, indeed. What was heaven worth if it was filled with betrayal? Yet she did not give up. She did not step down. She did not stop loving, even when love brought nothing but pain. That too is part of Hera's story. Her refusal to surrender. Her insistence on her dignity even when it was not respected. Her stubborn, painful endurance. The peacock followed her everywhere now, a constant reminder of what she had done and lost. Argus's eyes, watching even in death. Those eyes had seen everything. The affair, the transformation, the imprisonment, the murder. They watched her still, silent witnesses to divine cruelty. Had she been too harsh, too vengeful? Such questions did not trouble Hera for long. She was a goddess. She did not doubt herself. And yet, in the quiet moments, when she sat alone in her garden, the peacock's eyes seemed to ask questions she could not answer. But there was no time for such reflection. Word had come to Olympus. Zeus had found another lover, and this time, his choice would have consequences that shook the very foundations of Hera's world. Hera had punished Io for years. She had transformed her, tormented her, driven her across the world. And yet, what had it truly accomplished? Zeus had not changed. If anything, he had grown more brazen, more careless, more certain that his queen could never truly stop him. Io had escaped her wrath and been elevated to godhood. The victim had become the victor. Hera's cruelty had created a new deity. And Argus, loyal Argus with his 100 eyes, was dead. Gone forever, leaving only feathers and memories. Was any of it worth that price? Such thoughts troubled Hera in the quiet hours. But she was not permitted quiet hours for long. Olympus buzzed with new gossip, a new scandal. The name on every divine tongue was Alcmene, a mortal queen of Thebes, renowned throughout Greece for her virtue, her beauty, and her unwavering faithfulness to her husband. Alcmene loved her husband Amphitryon completely. She would never betray him. This, of course, made her irresistible to Zeus. While Amphitryon was away at war, Zeus came to Alcmene disguised as her husband. She welcomed him to her bed, believing him to be the man she loved. It was perhaps Zeus's cruelest trick, not seduction but impersonation. Alcmene's faithfulness was used against her, her virtue twisted into unwitting betrayal. When Hera learned of this, something cold settled into her heart. This was different from the others. This was not a willing affair. This was theft. And then came worse news still. Alcmene was pregnant. She carried Zeus's child, a child conceived through deception and divine violation. Zeus himself made a proclamation that echoed through Olympus. He swore a great oath, his voice ringing with pride and prophecy. The child born this day, he declared, of my bloodline, shall become the greatest of all heroes. He shall rule over all those around him. Hera's mind worked quickly. Zeus had sworn an oath. He had not specified which child. He had not named Alcmene's baby directly. There was another woman of Zeus's bloodline also pregnant. The wife of Sthenelus, carrying a child who was also descended from Zeus, just more distantly. If that other child were born first, Zeus's oath would apply to him instead. The prophecy would be stolen from Alcmene's son. Hera summoned her daughter Eileithyia, the goddess of childbirth. She gave her instructions that would change the course of Greek mythology forever. Go to Alcmene, she commanded. Sit outside her door with your legs crossed and your hands clasped. Do not move until I tell you. Eileithyia's crossed limbs would block the birth, holding Alcmene in endless labor. The baby could not be born until the goddess moved. For 7 days and 7 nights, Alcmene screamed in agony. The child fought to be born, but divine magic held him trapped. Meanwhile, Hera hastened the other birth. The wife of Sthenelus delivered her son 2 months early. A boy named Eurystheus, weak and premature. Zeus's oath was fulfilled. Eurystheus, not Alcmene's son, would be the ruler. The prophecy had been twisted to Hera's purpose. Only then did Hera release Eileithyia. Only then was Alcmene's child finally permitted to enter the world, hours too late. The baby was born with his twin brother Iphicles. But while Iphicles was ordinary, the first twin was extraordinary from his first breath. Alcmene named him Alcides. But the world would come to know him by another name, a name that meant, ironically, glory of Hera, Heracles. Why that name? Some say Alcmene hoped to appease the goddess who had tormented her. Others say it was fate's cruel joke. Hera's glory would come through her greatest enemy. Hera looked upon this infant and felt hatred unlike anything before. This child was proof of Zeus's betrayal. This child threatened her with his very existence. And worse, she could sense his potential. Even as a baby, his divine blood sang with power. He would indeed become the greatest of heroes if he lived. If he lived. That was the question Hera now pondered. She had delayed his birth, but could not prevent it. Could she prevent him from reaching manhood? The war against Heracles had begun. A war that would span decades, cost countless lives, and ultimately teach Hera a lesson she never expected to learn. Hera did not wait long to strike. When Heracles was only 8 months old, she sent 2 enormous serpents to his nursery, their scales gleaming with poison. The serpents coiled toward the cradle, where Heracles slept beside his mortal twin brother Iphicles. Death approached on silent scales. Iphicles woke first. He saw the serpents and screamed, flailing in terror, his infant mind overwhelmed by the horror approaching. But Heracles simply opened his eyes. He looked at the serpents without fear. Then, impossibly, he smiled. His tiny hands shot out and grasped the serpents by their throats. The creatures writhed, hissed, tried to bite. But the infant's grip was like iron. By the time Alcmene and the guards burst into the nursery, it was over. Heracles sat laughing in his cradle, holding 2 strangled serpents like toys. The prophet Tiresias was summoned. He looked upon the child and spoke of a future filled with glory and suffering. This boy, he said, would become the greatest hero who ever lived. Word of this miracle reached Olympus. Hera's first assassination attempt had failed spectacularly, only proving the child's divine nature to all who heard the tale. She would need to be more subtle, more patient. She could not simply strike him down. She would have to destroy him from within. Years passed. Heracles grew into a young man of extraordinary strength and skill. He was trained by the greatest teachers in Greece. He learned archery from Eurytus, wrestling from Autolycus, chariot driving from Amphitryon, and music from Linus. He excelled at everything except patience. When his music teacher Linus struck him in frustration, Heracles struck back with his lyre. The blow killed Linus instantly. The hero's temper was as mighty as his strength. He was sent to the countryside to tend cattle, a punishment that suited his restless nature. There, alone with his thoughts, he made a choice that would define his life. 2 women appeared before him on a mountain path. One was soft and beautiful, promising pleasure and ease. The other was stern, offering hardship and glory. Heracles chose the path of virtue and hardship. He chose to be a hero, whatever the cost. Hera, watching from above, noted his choice with cold interest. He returned to civilization and married Megara, a princess of Thebes. For a brief time, he knew happiness. They had children together, a family he adored. Hera saw this happiness and knew it was her moment. She could not kill him with serpents. But she could make him kill himself, in a way. She could break his mind. She sent madness upon him, a divine insanity that descended like a red fog, twisting his perceptions, filling his mind with visions of enemies where there were none. In his delusion, Heracles saw his wife and children as monsters, enemies of Greece, threats that had to be destroyed. He reached for his weapons. What happened next was the greatest tragedy of Greek mythology. The hero became the monster. The protector became the destroyer. When the madness lifted, Heracles found himself surrounded by the bodies of those he loved most. His wife, his children, slain by his own hands. The scream that tore from his throat shook the walls of Thebes. It was the sound of a soul being destroyed from within. On Olympus, Hera heard that scream and smiled. This was her victory. Not his death, but something worse. His destruction while still alive. Heracles wanted to die. He sought death eagerly, hoping to escape his guilt. But his cousin Theseus stopped him. Death, Theseus said, was too easy. Go to Delphi, Theseus urged. Ask the oracle how you can atone. There must be a way to find peace, even after this horror. Heracles traveled to Delphi, a hollow man walking through a world that seemed meaningless. The oracle gave him an answer he had not expected. Serve your cousin Eurystheus, the oracle commanded, the king of Mycenae, who rules because of Hera's manipulation. Complete whatever labors he assigns you. If you complete these labors, the oracle promised, you will be purified. Your guilt will be cleansed, and you will achieve immortality itself. And so Heracles went to Eurystheus, the weak king who had stolen his birthright. He knelt before this lesser man and offered his service. Eurystheus, guided by Hera's whispers, devised labors designed to be impossible. Tasks that would surely kill even the strongest hero. The first labor: slay the Nemean lion, a beast whose golden hide could not be pierced by any weapon. Heracles found the monster in its cave. When arrows and sword bounced off its hide, Heracles used his bare hands. He strangled the lion as he had strangled the serpents in his cradle. He wore its impenetrable skin as armor from that day forward. The first impossible labor was complete. Hera seethed at the news. The second labor: destroy the Lernaean Hydra, a serpent with 9 heads. For each head cut off, 2 more grew back. Heracles called upon his nephew Ilos for help. As Heracles cut each head, Ilos burned the stump with fire, preventing regrowth. Together they prevailed. Hera, furious, sent a giant crab to distract Heracles during the battle. He crushed it underfoot without pausing. She placed it in the stars as cancer, a monument to her failed intervention. The third labor: capture the golden hind of Artemis, a deer sacred to the goddess of the hunt. A deer that could outrun an arrow. Heracles chased the deer for a full year before finally catching it. Artemis confronted him, but he explained his burden, and she let him borrow the creature. The fourth labor: capture the Erymanthean boar alive. The fifth: clean the stables of King Augeas, which held 30 years of filth, in a single day. Heracles diverted 2 rivers through the stables, washing away decades of waste in hours. Cleverness, not just strength, defined his heroism. The sixth labor: drive away the Stymphalian birds, man-eating creatures with bronze beaks and metallic feathers they could launch like arrows. Athena gave Heracles a bronze rattle forged by Hephaestus. Its noise startled the birds into flight, where Heracles shot them down with his arrows. 6 labors complete. 6 times Heracles had faced the impossible and emerged victorious. Hera's frustration grew with each success. The 7th labor: capture the Cretan bull that had fathered the Minotaur. The 8th: steal the man-eating horses of Diomedes. The 9th labor: obtain the belt of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons. She offered it willingly, impressed by his reputation and bearing. But Hera spread rumors among the Amazons that Heracles meant to kidnap their queen. Battle erupted. Hippolyta died in the chaos. Another innocent destroyed by the goddess's spite. The 10th labor: steal the cattle of Geryon, a giant with 3 bodies who lived at the western edge of the world. Heracles sailed in a golden cup borrowed from Helios, the sun god. He slew Geryon and drove the cattle back across the world. 10 labors complete. But Eurystheus, still guided by Hera, declared 2 labors invalid. Heracles had received help with the Hydra. He had demanded payment for the stables. 2 more labors were assigned. The 11th: steal the golden apples of the Hesperides, from a garden at the edge of the world, guarded by a dragon. Heracles convinced the Titan Atlas to retrieve the apples, holding the entire sky on his shoulders, while Atlas completed the task. When Atlas returned, he tried to leave Heracles holding the sky forever. But Heracles tricked him into taking it back, then fled with the apples. The 12th and final labor was the worst of all: descend into the underworld itself and capture Cerberus, the 3-headed hound that guarded the gates of the dead. Heracles descended into Hades. He wrestled the 3-headed beast into submission using only his strength, as Hades had demanded no weapons be used. He dragged Cerberus up into the sunlight, presented it to the terrified Eurystheus, then returned the beast to the underworld as promised. The 12 labors were complete. Heracles had accomplished the impossible again and again. He was purified, just as the oracle had promised. But Hera was not finished. The labors had failed to destroy him. She would continue to plague his life with misfortune at every turn. She drove him mad again, causing him to kill another friend. She sent storms to wreck his ships. She poisoned allies against him. Heracles endured it all. He kept fighting, kept helping others, kept being a hero despite everything the Queen of Gods threw at him. In the end, it was not Hera who killed him. It was his own trusting nature. His second wife Deianira, trying to keep his love, accidentally poisoned him. She had been tricked by a dying centaur into believing the poison was a love charm. When Heracles put on the tainted robe, it burned into his flesh. The pain was unbearable even for him. The greatest hero in history built his own funeral pyre on Mount Ida and climbed atop it. As the flames consumed his mortal body, something unexpected happened. His divine half, the part inherited from Zeus, rose from the fire. Zeus reached down and lifted his son to Olympus. Heracles, who had suffered more than any mortal, was welcomed among the gods as an equal. Heracles stood in the halls of Olympus, no longer a suffering mortal, but an immortal god. He had achieved the promise of the oracle. And there, waiting for him, was Hera, his tormentor, his enemy. The goddess who had tried to destroy him from his first breath. All of Olympus watched. What would happen when eternal enemies finally stood face to face with no advantage to either side? Hera looked at Heracles. She saw the scars of every trial she had put him through. She saw the strength that had overcome every obstacle. She saw, perhaps for the first time, what she had created. Her persecution had not destroyed him. It had forged him into something greater than he might otherwise have been. Without her labors, would he be a god today? Without her madness, would he have been purified? Her cruelty had become his path to glory. Something shifted in Hera's heart. Not forgiveness, exactly, not regret, but perhaps acceptance, perhaps wariness, perhaps recognition. She stepped forward, the other gods tensed. But instead of attack, Hera extended her hand. "Welcome to Olympus," she said. Her voice carried no warmth, but no hatred either. "You have earned your place here." Heracles took her hand. He did not smile, he did not thank her. But he accepted the gesture for what it was, an ending. And then Hera did something that shocked every god present. She offered him her daughter Hebe, the goddess of youth, as his immortal bride. Hebe and Heracles wed in a ceremony attended by all the gods. The hero who bore Hera's name finally became her son-in-law. It was, perhaps, the strangest reconciliation in all of mythology. The persecutor becoming family to the persecuted. The enemy becoming kin. Did Hera truly forgive Heracles? Did she ever apologize for the suffering she caused? The myths do not say. Perhaps gods are not capable of such things. But something changed between them. The war was over. The hatred had burned itself out. What remained was something like respect. Heracles had won by not becoming what Hera tried to make him. He remained a hero despite everything. He proved that even divine hatred could be survived. And Hera had learned, perhaps, that vengeance has limits. That some enemies cannot be destroyed. That sometimes the only choice is to stop fighting. The Queen of Heaven sat in her garden, surrounded by peacock feathers with their 100 watching eyes. Argus still observed. He always would. Zeus still betrayed her, even after all this. That would never change. But perhaps she could choose how to respond. Perhaps she could find another way. Or perhaps she simply grew tired. Immortality is a long time to carry rage. Even the greatest fury eventually burns down to embers. This was the final lesson of Heracles and Hera. That endings are possible. That even the longest wars must someday cease. The hero found his place among the gods. The goddess found something like peace. Neither got everything they wanted, but both survived. And the Greeks told this story for centuries. Not because it had a happy ending, but because it had a true one. an ending where everyone was changed. Heracles became the symbol of strength and perseverance, the hero who could overcome anything, even divine persecution. And Hera remained the queen of heaven, still powerful, still watchful, but perhaps, just perhaps, a little wiser. That is the end of their war. But it is not the end of Hera's story. For there is still more to understand about the Queen of Heaven and her place in the Greek world. We have followed Hera through her greatest myths, the tragedy of Io, the war against Heracles. But what did these stories mean to the Greeks who told them? To understand Hera, we must understand Greek marriage. It was not the romantic partnership we might imagine today. It was an institution, a contract, a duty. Women had little choice in who they married. Once wed, they were expected to be faithful, obedient, and devoted, regardless of their husband's behavior. Men, however, faced no such restrictions. They could take concubines, visit courtesans, even father children outside marriage with little social consequence. This double standard was woven into the fabric of Greek society, and Hera's myths reflected it perfectly. She was bound by rules her husband openly ignored. In this context, Hera was not simply a jealous wife. She was the divine embodiment of every Greek woman who had been betrayed, humiliated, and expected to endure in silence. When women prayed to Hera, they prayed to someone who understood, someone who had felt what they felt, someone whose rage matched their own suppressed fury. This is why Hera was worshipped despite her apparent cruelty. The Greeks did not see her as a villain. They saw her as a goddess who fought back when fighting back was forbidden. Her vengeance against Zeus's lovers was problematic, yes, but consider the alternative. In a world where she could not punish her husband, what options did she have? She could submit completely, accepting each humiliation with grace. Many Greek women did exactly that. But Hera refused. She fought, even when fighting was futile. There is something admirable in that refusal, even when her methods were cruel. She insisted on her dignity when the world denied her any right to it. The peacock became her symbol for good reason. Its eyes represented vigilance, yes, but also beauty combined with watchfulness, grace that never stopped observing. The pomegranate spoke of fertility and marriage, but also of blood and sacrifice. The ruby seeds resembled drops of blood. Marriage, the symbol suggested, required sacrifice. The cow, her sacred animal, represented nurturing and motherhood. But cows are also yoked, controlled, owned. The symbol cut both ways. Even her lotus, top scepter, told a story. The lotus rises from mud to bloom in beauty. Hera's authority emerged from the muck of her painful marriage. Her conflicts with Zeus's children were not simple spite. They represented the threat illegitimate children posed to legitimate heirs in Greek society. A Greek wife's status depended entirely on her children. If her husband's bastards rose to prominence, her own children's futures were threatened. Hera's persecution of Heracles makes more sense in this light. He threatened not just her pride, but her children's divine inheritance. And yet, the myth also critiques this system. Hera's vengeance destroys innocence. Her jealousy causes suffering far beyond what justice would require. The Greeks were not blind to the problems in their own society. Their myths explored these tensions, showing the damage done when power was distributed so unequally. Hera embodied a paradox at the heart of Greek life. The goddess of marriage was trapped in the worst marriage of all. The protector of families could not protect her own. Perhaps that was the point. By showing even a goddess suffering these injustices, the myths acknowledged that no woman was truly safe from them. But the myths also showed survival. Hera endured. She maintained her throne, her power, her identity. She did not disappear into her husband's shadow. For Greek women with no hope of escape from bad marriages, Hera offered a model of persistence. Not happiness, perhaps, but dignity. Not victory, but survival. Her reconciliation with Heracles teaches another lesson. That even the deepest hatred can eventually exhaust itself. That enemies can become family. The transformation of Argus's eyes into peacock feathers speaks of how we honor those who serve us. How death can become beauty. How loss can become legacy. Io's journey from victim to goddess shows that suffering can be transcended. That the persecuted can become powerful. That endings are not always what they seem. These are the deeper meanings hidden in Hera's myths. Not simple morality tales, but complex explorations of power, gender, suffering, and survival. The ancient Greeks understood that life was complicated. Their gods reflected that complexity. They were neither pure heroes nor simple villains. Hera, perhaps more than any other goddess, embodied this truth. She was wronged, and she wronged others. She suffered and caused suffering. She was, in her way, deeply human. Hera's story did not end with the Greeks. When Rome conquered Greece, they adopted the Greek gods and gave them new names. Hera became Juno. Juno retained all of Hera's domains: marriage, childbirth, the protection of women. But the Romans emphasized her role as a goddess of the state itself. She became Juno Regina, Queen Juno, one of the three most important deities of Rome alongside Jupiter and Minerva. Her temple stood on the Capitoline Hill. The month of June is named for Juno. Romans considered it the most auspicious time for weddings, a tradition that continues to this day. Roman women celebrated the Matronalia festival in Juno's honor each March. Husbands gave gifts to wives, and slaves were served by their mistresses for a day. When Christianity rose to dominance, the old gods faded from worship. But they did not disappear. They transformed into symbols, archetypes, stories. Medieval and Renaissance artists rediscovered Greek mythology. They painted Hera again and again, fascinated by her beauty, her power, her tragic marriage. Rubens painted her voluptuous and powerful. Rembrandt showed her dignity. Countless artists captured the moment Zeus first deceived her with the cuckoo. In literature, Hera appeared in Ovid's Metamorphoses, Virgil's Aeneid, and countless other works. Each author saw something different in her complex character. The archetype she represents endures in modern storytelling. The scorned wife who refuses to be silent. The queen whose power is undermined by her husband's wandering. From fairy tale queens to political dramas, from soap operas to prestige television, we keep telling stories about women in Hera's position. Sometimes these women are villains. Sometimes they are sympathetic. Often, like Hera herself, they are both at once. Complex figures defying simple judgment. The peacock remains associated with royalty and pride across cultures. Its eyes still seem to watch, just as Argus watched over Io thousands of years ago. Astronomers named the asteroid Juno after her Roman incarnation. A piece of rock drifting through space now carries the Queen of Heaven's name. Psychologists speak of Hera archetypes, patterns of behavior relating to partnership, jealousy, and the need for commitment. Her story helps us understand ourselves. And still today, when couples marry in June, when peacocks spread their feathers, when we tell stories of queens wronged and wives betrayed, Hera lives on. She lives in every story about the cost of infidelity, in every tale of power imbalanced in marriage, in every woman who demanded dignity when the world denied her any. The Greeks created her 3,000 years ago. But the questions she raises are as relevant today as they were in ancient Argos. Some stories never grow old. And so we come to the end of our journey with Hera, the Queen of Heaven. We have walked through her temples and witnessed her triumphs and her sorrows. We have seen her as a young goddess, full of hope, choosing love even when love was won through trickery. We watched that hope slowly harden into something else. We followed her through vengeance and grief, through victories that felt like defeats, through a war that lasted generations and ended not in conquest but in peace. Hera was never simply a villain. She was never simply a victim. She was something far more interesting. She was complicated. She was real. Perhaps that is why her stories have survived for 3,000 years. Because we recognize something in her. Something that transcends time and culture. The need for loyalty. The pain of betrayal. the impossible choice between fighting back and maintaining peace. These are struggles we all understand. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, perhaps you will dream of peacock feathers spreading beneath an ancient sky, of temples where women prayed for strength. Perhaps you will dream of a queen who refused to be invisible, who demanded her place, even when the world tried to push her aside. Or perhaps you will simply sleep, and that is perfectly fine too. These stories will be here whenever you need them. They have waited this long. They can wait a little longer. Thank you for spending this time with us, exploring the myths and legends that have shaped human imagination for millennia. May your sleep be deep and your dreams be gentle. And may you wake refreshed, ready to face whatever challenges your own story brings. Until next time, from all of us here, good night. And remember, even queens need their rest.